It's a book that's on pretty much every high school reading list, a classic story about being a teenager and feeling like an outsider. But for one man, this book became something else entirely, a sort of permission slip for murder. Today, we're digging into the really disturbing connection between The Catcher in the Rye and the death of a true music icon.
And this is where the story gets incredibly dark. These are the words of Mark Chapman spoken at his own murder trial. Think about that. He wasn't reading from a confession he wrote or some political manifesto. He was quoting a novel.
So picture this. It's December 8th, 1980. Mark Chapman has just done the unthinkable. He shot and killed John Lennon right outside of his apartment building in New York. But he doesn't run. He doesn't try to get away. He just sits down on the sidewalk under a street lamp and starts reading his copy of The Catcher in the Rye until the police arrive.
And that's the big question, right? How on earth does a book about a cynical teenager from a fancy boarding school lead to this? It's a bizarre and frankly terrifying puzzle that connects literature, psychology, and fame in a way you just can't ignore. To even begin to understand the killer, you have to first understand the kid in the book that he was so obsessed with.
So, let's dive into the world of the book's main character, Holden Caulfield. His voice is one of the most famous in American literature. But for Mark Chapman, that voice wasn't just relatable, it was a command. Right off the bat, you get a feel for this kid. He is just dripping with cynicism. He's got this intense hatred for anything that he thinks is fake, or, as he loves to say, phony. And movies? Yeah, they are #1 on his hit list. And see, this right here gets to the absolute core of Holden's whole deal. It's not just that he dislikes actors, it's the why. For him, the moment you become aware that you're good at something and you start performing for an audience, you've lost it. You've crossed the line into being a phony. So, let's put the pieces together. Holden is a 16-year-old kid who's basically failing at life, at least by society standards. He's been kicked out of school after school, so he just wanders around New York by himself, judging everyone and everything. He's obsessed with how phony the adult world is, and he has this desperate, almost painful desire to protect the innocence of children. But, and this is so important, we only see the world through his very biased, very messed up perspective. He's what we call an unreliable narrator, and that little detail is going to become chillingly relevant in a bit. But is this all just, normal teenage angst? Or is there something much deeper and more troubled going on inside Holden's head? To really get why he's so fixated on phonies, we have to pull back the curtain and look at the actual psychology. One of the most compelling ways to look at Holden comes from a psychologist named Alfred Adler. He came up with this idea called the superiority complex. Now, it's not what it sounds like. It isn't someone who genuinely thinks they're better than everyone. It's actually a kind of psychological armor. It's a defense mechanism that people use to cover up massive, deep-down feelings of being, not good enough. It's a way to act big when you feel incredibly small. Does that sound like anyone we know? Adler said this complex pops up in a few key ways. He called them safeguard tendencies. And Holden? He is a walking textbook of all of them. He makes excuses for failing, always blaming the school or the teachers. He gets into fights to feel tough, and most importantly, he's constantly depreciating others. He tears people down to build himself up. This is the perfect example. Holden has an older brother, DB, who's a really successful writer in Hollywood. Is Holden proud? Nope. He calls him a prostitute. Why? Because DB is making it big in a world Holden sees as the ultimate center of phoniness. So by tearing down his brother's success, Holden gets to feel morally superior. It's a classic move.
So where do all these feelings of being not good enough even come from? Well, a lot of experts point straight to family trauma. Holden's younger brother, Ale, who he absolutely adored, died tragically. And it seems like his parents just emotionally checked out after that, leaving Holden feeling alone and completely insecure. So his whole crusade against the phony world, it might just be a massive, complicated way of dealing with his own private pain.
Okay, so we have a pretty good psychological map of Holden Caulfield's mind. Now let's take that map and lay it over the man who saw himself as Holden's real-life double, Mark David Chapman. How does a character's fictional pain become a real person's motive for murder? To get what was going on in Chapman's world, you have to understand this kind of unwritten rulebook of rock and roll in the 70s. For hardcore fans, there was a huge dividing line. You had Paul McCartney, who many saw as the one who sold out, the commercial one, the phony. But John Lennon? John Lennon was the real deal. He was the artist, the truth teller. He was authentic.
And Lennon basically cemented that image by vanishing for 6 years just to raise his son. I mean, you can't get more anti-celebrity than that. But then, in 1980, he came back. And he came back in a big way. Tons of interviews, magazine covers, all for a new album called Double Fantasy. An album about being a happy husband and father.
And for a devoted, obsessive fan like Mark Chapman, this must have felt like a total betrayal. The reviews for the album weren't exactly glowing, but this one had to have been a dagger to the heart. A major music magazine basically said he was starting to sound like Paul McCartney. In the world of Holden Caulfield, that's the ultimate insult. They were calling the authentic guy a phony.
And that is the absolute center of this terrifying theory. Mark Chapman, a guy who felt just as lost and invisible as Holden Caulfield, was watching his hero break the code. John Lennon, the symbol of artistic truth, was suddenly doing all the phony celebrity stuff. In Chapman's mind, he was selling out.
And this takes us right back to that quote from the very beginning. In Chapman's completely warped reality, he wasn't a murderer. No, he was the catcher in the rye. He believed he had to physically catch John Lennon to stop him from falling off the cliff into the world of phonies. He thought that by killing the man, he was saving the pure, innocent idea of him.
It's just a truly disturbing thought, isn't it? And it makes you look at this book, a book that has brought comfort to so many people, in a completely different and much more dangerous light.
I mean, we have to be clear. For millions and millions of readers, The Catcher in the Rye is a lifeline. Holden's voice makes people who feel like outsiders feel seen, feel understood. He's this powerful symbol of what it's like to be young and angry at a world that just doesn't seem to make any sense.
But here is the final, absolutely horrific twist in this story. In a sick, perverse way, Chapman's plan actually worked. By killing Lennon when he did, he froze him in time. He stopped the story from continuing. He cemented the legend of John Lennon, the pure artist, and erased the complicated human being who was just trying to live his life. He caught it.
And so that's the question that hangs over this book, especially now. Is Holden Caulfield just a misunderstood hero for kids who feel alone, or is there something dangerous in his worldview, a kind of toxic comfort that, in the wrong mind, can curdle into something truly monstrous? Like the book itself, there's no easy answer.